Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me today to talk about the AI wave. My name is Suzie Robinson. I've worked with intranets for more years, really, than I want to reflect on just now, and I've been a consultant since about 2019. And at Clearbox, we help businesses of different shapes and sizes with the people side of the digital workplace. This could be helping with wide-reaching strategy or community management or even homepage design and all things in between and bigger than that. I also manage our two reports where we review the best employee experience platforms on the market today. There's almost 1,500 pages of content between the two reports where we analyse the products against real-world business scenarios. It's the insight that I've got from these reports and the conversations that I've had with vendors as well that has allowed me to see some of the features I'm going to talk about today. So here's the agenda for today. It's a relatively simple one. I'm going to show you the features that are already available now, what's coming up in the next 6 months-ish. Of course, we can't talk in absolutes with product development, but roughly 6 months or so. And then we'll have an opportunity for a Q&A as well at the end. So please do make use of the Q&A panel, and I'll get around to what I can at the end. But while I do those few things, I'm also going to consider whether the features will save people time, as well as whether they're going to create a better end result for those consuming the output as well. I'm also going to flag where human intervention might be needed along the way, and I'm also going to add my thoughts about the implications for organisations in general terms. Each organisation situation is different, of course, so I can't talk about every single one and every single permutation. I'm just going to add kind of a sprinkling of my thoughts for each organisation as well. So let's get started, and I'm going to show you those features and tools that are on the market right now. Some have been released since the start of the year, while others have been around for a little while. As a quick note, I've not included machine translation of content, but that can be an AI service that many of you will be familiar with, so I've not included that amongst the mix here. And also, just for reference, the little robot here is called Pepper, and apparently is a robot that can read emotions, so give you some implication of what AI can ultimately lead to outside of digital workplaces as well. So here's the first example, starting with a search example that was launched just in the last few months by a company called Halo. This is a likely answers type approach that you probably will have seen in internet search engines like Google, where an answer is given instead of simply returning a document or a page. So in the example on screen, an AI is generating the answer from the intranet database and helpfully has a tag to indicate that the answer has come from the AI as well. If you're looking for a file, it'll tell you where to navigate to find it, but then the files are returned as part of the results underneath, so as part of a traditional intranet search. So while it would be nice if it did just take you there or provide a link within its answer, the results are at least relatively close by to find. I think this is a helpful little feature, although, as it says, the answer can be wrong that it comes from when it comes from the AI. So I'd suggest having a simple process or policy in place on what to do should the AI hallucinate, and that's what it means when it does something wrong or provides the wrong answer, so that you can then work out what to do if inaccurate information is being provided by the results. And if there's good search analytics behind the scenes, then I think this will be really valuable. But we know that analytics typically across the whole industry is one of the weaker areas of these sorts of products. So I'm hoping to see that sort of thing develop a little bit more so that people who manage intranets can see what people are looking for, what's there for people to find, and the answers that the AI is giving so that it can be tweaked a little bit and made more appropriate. Here's the next example from a product called First Up. First Up includes some very detailed profile pages, which can be populated from HR systems or updated by the individual, for example, so that they can add their pronouns. What's included in the profile is then available for audience targeting, which is really helpful. Once the audience is selected, the publisher has the option to let First Up send the message to the individuals within the group. The message will be delivered at the best time for the individual and also for the priority level of the message itself. This is on an individual basis. So, for example, Jamil may receive the message at 9 AM on a Monday, while Philippa receives it at 11 AM on a Tuesday. The AI delivery is helpful for the end user as it matches the individual's behaviour and helps reduce overwhelm. The AI also adjusts itself based on profile changes. So if Philippa travels to New York, the AI will adjust based on her new behaviour and new time zone as well. For publishers, this will help reach the right people at the right time, which is always a challenge. And with the additional support of a fatigue ratings, do you know whether this particular audience has been targeted too much with messages? There is a way for publishers to manually choose when to publish to, so it doesn't have to be left to the AI if someone doesn't want to, which is a helpful addition, I think. As with any audience targeting, this does rely on audience data being present and maintained. It would be helpful for platforms like this to offer reminders to prompt people to keep their profile updated and offer an easy way to contact IT or HR to get it corrected if it's living in a different system somewhere elsewhere, and so that it can be updated centrally rather than by the individual. Now I've started to talk about news, let's move on to generative AI within these products, which is probably the thing that's most on people's mind in this sort of area. The first example I have to share is Staff-Based Companion. Staff-Based are taking things slow-ish with generative AI, as they are aware there are risks and conversations still happening across organisations around its usage. This example, this companion, has therefore been designed to shorten content length, so those of us who like writing a lot can self-edit using AI. It will also provide a draft that has to be edited before it can be published, as well as generating things like titles and summaries from the body of the content. The companion helps provide a nice starting point for publishers while relying on them to flesh out and edit what's provided, as well as understand what's changed and whether it has changed for the better. As with all the generative AI features I'm going to talk about, the skills around editing for accuracy and phrasing choices is an area organisations will need to consider. While it'll save time with initial drafts and editing down content, the publisher needs to understand whether the output is appropriate for their reader still. Halo is the next example and is actually the first example I saw of a ChatGPT integration at the start of the year, and I think it works well. The screenshot here shows the editing features for existing text, which includes making the tone more or less formal, changing the length and simplifying the content as well. Hashtags can be generated, which is Halo's version of news and content topics, providing a good head start, but shouldn't be seen as a complete replacement for manually adding important hashtags as well. Halo also includes generative AI features that will create a draft based on prompts. What's returned isn't based on the confines of the intranet or company data though, it's a direct pull from ChatGPT, so publishers will have to carefully check the accuracy and appropriateness of tone, and also the content as well. As with the staff-based example, the importance of editing what's returned shouldn't be underestimated. It's also worth noting there's no flag or other indication that content was created using AI, so organisations should consider whether they're comfortable with that or whether a note should be added manually at the end of the content when someone has actually used AI to generate it. Unily is another example of a product with generative AI features. This takes a form-like approach to generate content though, so publishers can make a choice as they progress through the creation process rather than using those simple click and choose options from Halo. Unily has an intranet filter placed in the background as well, which will sieve results from the Microsoft AI to make sure it's appropriate for this internally facing setting. It will also gather context from the type of content that's being created. So if the publisher is creating an event, then the content is created with the context of an event overlaid. Again, there is no flag to show that it's been AI generated, and publishers will have to carefully edit the output again. When Unily showed me this feature, they highlighted that they are considering the laws, legislations, and conversations on the topic of AI as they develop this tool. So this and all the other products that I'm showing you now may well change and evolve as the conversations do as well. Like Unily, Atlas includes a form approach to AI. Which sites include the AI capability can be controlled to limit who has access to the tool, plus approval workflows are available so they can be more than one editor for the content. In the form, you can see there's a prompt for subject metadata to be applied, which helps provide useful context for the article and for the AI as well. Then this is what the generated article looks like once the AI has done its thing. There's some good formatting applied, which is helpful, but then can also be edited by a publisher later to maybe smarten it up a little bit. Again, there's no generated by AI sort of tag, and as with others, the publisher will need to carefully check and edit the content that's created. The final example that I want to draw on of what's available right now is from Intranet, where AI supports publishers with language choice. This helps with aspects like inclusive language selection, folks instead of guys, allow list instead of whitelist, for example, and it will also gauge the sentiment of the content, highlighting where maybe overly negative language might be used or negative language or wording choices. While these features don't save time for the publisher necessarily, they do help to create a better experience for readers by presenting information with inclusive and positive wording. As we all know from experience with spelling and grammar checkers, though, these suggestions shouldn't always be applied, but the fact that Intranet flags them is really helpful. In my opinion, this is a really positive use of AI, supporting and complementing someone's writing skills to make small but important improvements, rather than completely overtaking everything. So that was a snapshot of what's already been rolled out, bearing in mind that ChatGPT was only launched in November 2022. So some of these products have moved incredibly quickly to get these features onto the market already. Some of the features have been around for a long time as well, but there is that current AI boom that really is creating more AI tools and the focus on those things needing to be present in products. So we're going to look at what's coming next in the next 6 months, and Copilot developments are certainly top of mind from Microsoft. But I want to share a few other upcoming features first. All of these, as I say, are going to be available in the next 6-ish months, obviously depending on development rates of the different vendors. So staff-based companion search will provide a digital assistant chatbot-esque approach to returning answers. So you can already find this in tools like WorkGrid, where results are returned from integrated systems to answer questions like how much vacation time do I have left? What's useful here is that it will also display content from across the intranet, where the AI is scouring internal content that it feels is an appropriate response depending on the question asked. So someone could ask, how do I dispute how much vacation days I have left? And be given the link to a policy, as well as a relevant answer formed from that policy. Unlike chatbots that often have to be taught answers, this AI will learn and only use internally facing content to do so. There's still a risk of inaccuracies with the information returned, and the answers have to be accessible to the AI in the first place. But this could deliver a really nice employee experience and reduce the number of systems that they have to access, and also the number of the questions that people like HR or IT may receive, for example. This next example from Intranet is a video, so hopefully it works. Click, there we go. So the AI will take what's written and generate an FAQ based on the content and also what it thinks people are going to ask. You can see it generating an initial draft, which is then being further manipulated using AI, but could also be physically edited by the publisher instead. Caution is advised here, though, as there might be a temptation to create an FAQ about everything because it is really easy to do. In my opinion, the point of an FAQ is that there are questions that are being asked frequently. So publishers should consider whether this really is the most appropriate way to present information in the first place. I also know that different communicators have different feelings about the appropriateness of FAQs at all, as some just don't like using them to share information. So this is helpful, but maybe not relevant everywhere. A nice addition is that the same technology can also be used to create quiz blocks that would test employees' understanding of what they've read in that particular article. This is a really helpful use case for the organisation, for compliance purposes in particular, also for the publisher who might not be skilled at writing simple quiz prompts, and also for the reader to encourage understanding and to allow them to prove that they've understood the really core and vital messaging. I want to highlight the output of one of the AI changes here, though, where the publisher wants to change the tone to being confident. The AI adds the word confidently, and in my opinion, an unnecessary bit of text at the end of the sentence. This highlights the need for editing that I've mentioned a few times now, and where time is saved reformatting content for people, they will still need to check the accuracy, tone, and phrasing before it can be published. It's worthwhile highlighting as well that this is an AI issue, not something to do with Interact. It's the way that the AI actually approaches the prompt, not the way that the Interact has programmed it. So, important distinction to make. And here's another example from Intranet. So in the coming months, products are going to introduce generative AI for image creation as well as for words. This is an example from Intranet where publishers will enter a written prompt and indicate a style for the image, such as abstract, before it's then generated. This could be a time saver for publishers and help lift those intranets that can feel quite word heavy at times to make them more attractive to employees. Human intervention is needed here, though, with attention paid to the accuracy of images as well as words that are created using AI. So this example was created from the prompt "cats in bow ties" in an oil painting style. Note that there are more bow ties and bodies than heads in the final image. Note that this is an issue with AI again, not the way that Interact has implemented it, but it's also something that needs to be paid attention to during that editing check of any AI-generated content. Your organisation will also need to decide whether it's comfortable using AI to create images due to concerns around authenticity. Additionally, a lot of businesses today don't use stock images, so will AI be an acceptable alternative, or will it be seen as a slightly different version of stock imagery? There's a lot to think about, and it will differ from organisation to organisation. So now it's time to have a look at SharePoint, and I have another video for you here. In this example, we're looking at site creation. Copilot in Microsoft uses large language models, your data in the Microsoft Graph, and Microsoft best practices to turn your written prompts into sites. The publisher will need to describe the site or page. Copilot in SharePoint will then begin to create it, and then work with the publisher to edit and refine it using conversational prompts. The site will collate content from across the intranet and align with the branding that's been configured as well. This looks great, but the site will still only be as good as the content that goes into it. From experience, it can be tricky to get publishers to use templates consistently, so perhaps this is going to give people too much freedom and result in more inconsistency. However, this does make the central creation of sites easier, so perhaps a central admin team could do the initial creation and then hand to departmental colleagues to refine. This could change the way intranet teams are currently structured, though, so again, organisations will need to consider the longer-term impact. And from creating sites, there is a similar process for creating pages as well. Copilot helps page authors turn their existing content into SharePoint pages. Copilot is being promoted as a web design partner in this context, taking your existing document or presentation and turning it into a page that leverages all the available web design visuals within SharePoint. Copilot can also help publishers rewrite page text, adjusting tone and length, for example. Again, this relies on the quality of the content. So if a publisher has created something in PowerPoint that doesn't look great, then the resulting SharePoint page won't look great either. Also, have you ever used PowerPoint when it suggests slide layouts? In my experience, they aren't always the nicest looking suggestions, so I wonder whether that will be a familiar experience when using Copilot here as well. However, this is a very easy process, and for those with a good starting point, this will save time and potentially improve the resulting SharePoint page for end users as well. But it is very easy. So easy, there could be a risk of loads of pages being created instead of alternative and more suitable content approaches or solutions. Getting governance right, therefore, remains an important point to think about when using these generative AI features. Copilot will also be available in Viva Engage. This first example is designed to encourage leaders to get involved in conversations. When the CEO or another leader selects a campaign or topic, Copilot will offer a summary of sentiment on that topic, including prompts to help jumpstart communications by providing a first draft to edit. Using these prompts, the CEO can drill into what other leaders or employees are talking about, add details to complete the post, and choose the tone of the message before personalizing with their own voice. Copilot then creates a draft post and will even add relevant attachments automatically. The CEO can then revise the message as needed before publishing. It can be difficult to get leaders to participate in spaces that feel social, like Viva Engage, so this might encourage usage as it reduces some workload. There's quite a lot being presented on this screen though, so the leader would need to read, absorb, use the AI to generate the post, then edit. So it might not be that time-saving after all. They will definitely need to check and edit the post before it's published to ensure the voice accurately reflects their own personal voice as well. There is a moral aspect to consider here, of course, around the authenticity of any message from a leader that isn't written by them. It does already happen now with ghostwriting, but this is going an extra step to remove the human connection altogether. It's a can of worms that I'm not going to open and talk about right now, unless someone does ask about it in the Q&A, but it should be an area of discussion within your organisation before it's rolled out. You really need to consider whether this is appropriate for people to use or not. So another feature in Copilot, it will also predict potential questions readers may have about a post and can prompt the author to answer those questions before they are even asked. As comments and reactions come in, Copilot suggests replies and prompts the publisher to refine the copy. So in this example, Copilot is supporting someone to develop a post so that it's as helpful as it can be for their readers. While it might feel longer for the publisher to read and absorb the suggestions, it could save them time in the long run as questions are already tackled within the post. The publisher will need to consider whether the suggested additions are beneficial and whether the additions are accurate or not, so editing skills again are needed here. Also, answering questions before something is shared isn't always helpful. Sometimes you want people to ask questions, even obvious ones, to generate conversation and to encourage a community feel, or even to show that the organisation is listening by publishers actually openly responding to those comments and questions that are being posted. So doing this in advance may actually not be beneficial for a communications process. Copilot is also coming to Answers in Viva, which is a Q&A space that encourages voting on questions and answers to crowdsource information. When an employee asks a question, Copilot can help suggest additional details to improve the clarity of the question. Copilot can also then help people provide answers to questions by recommending existing resources and potential answers. For questions that have many answers or replies, Copilot will create a summary of the best answer, as well as an overview of all of the contributions. Copilot will automatically aggregate information about each knowledge area into a curated view, complete with copy, FAQs, and resources, so people can dive deeper into the topics they are curious about. But for me, this feels a little bit superfluous. If the AI can help ask the right question, write the right answer, and summarize comprehensive results, why can't it jump to the final step and answer the question in the first place? It feels like a long-winded approach that either should encourage colleague collaboration, which should rely on knowledge that might not be captured elsewhere in writing, or help people find official content more quickly. It does look easy to use and could be helpful for some though, but I think it also risks creating more content the search engine would then have to filter through or highlight the need for governance to tidy any outdated content. So I've referenced these 4 areas as I've explored the different AI features that are available now and those that are coming up soon. I'm just going to summarise some of my thoughts where the AI tools are right now. So there are definitely features that will save time for both end users and publishers, as well as admins. But a lot of the time, the output is only as good as the input, and this has been a challenge for a long time. Also, the need to carefully review the AI output and edit it properly shouldn't be underestimated, so human intervention will be needed for a little while yet. For end users, I think there will be definite improvements to their experience as long as the quality and appropriateness of outputs is checked and adjusted when needed. Overall, however, there are questions around AI that Intranet teams should be considering and discussing with relevant departments or even senior leaders now. These can be as fine-grained as, does the CEO want to use a leader prompt in Viva, or macro topics, whether your organization feels comfortable using AI to do this sort of stuff at all. There's a lot to think about, and these products are already giving you the option to embrace AI slowly, or give it a giant bear hug and start using it immediately in very wide-ranging sorts of ways. There's all sorts of there for you to start thinking about and planning to use now as well. That's the end of the presentation bit then. We've got a little bit of time for Q&A. So over to you, Wedge, to help me navigate what may have come through.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we've got some questions coming up. Quick one from me, though, before I turn to them. Does everybody get Copilot? If you've already got SharePoint, can you expect Copilot to just start popping up?
Unfortunately, you cannot. So there are all sorts of different licenses associated with Microsoft, and Copilot is an additional cost on top of most of those licenses. And from my understanding, it can be quite a significant additional cost as well. So that is something that's worthwhile bearing in mind, that actually a lot of the other non-Microsoft products, generally those features are part of the licensing that's existing already, not additional costs. But with Microsoft, there is a little bit of a cost implication there.
Alrighty, thank you. Our friend Graham, hello Graham, he asks, can you instruct Copilot to avoid certain things when creating a site? For example, no hero web parts, no center aligned text.
I honestly am not sure. From what I've seen, it is about providing prompts in order for it to create something. So I think it will create based on what you're asking it to do, and then it will add those web parts if it feels that it's most appropriate to do that. So if you're creating a communication site, for example, then it may very well feel that a hero web part is automatically appropriate, just because that's the way that it's been trained. And of course, over time, as you use it more and as you apply templates behind the scenes, then that will also kind of curb its enthusiasm a little bit in places. So it will learn from what you're telling it to do as well, from my understanding.
Steve wonders if Copilot will be available in personal licenses accounts, for individuals and for families.
I would be surprised if Microsoft didn't, purely because it is additional cost. So I would be surprised if they didn't learn from organizations and then roll it out. But I've not seen that mentioned anywhere just yet. It's kind of mainly focusing on organizations from the information that I've seen.
And Steve suggests that Outlook would have to be upgraded if you want to use Copilot. I suppose some organizations have quite old Outlook apps.
Yes, and Outlook has got all sorts of things in it already. I mean, it's relatively recently added its own notifications, and now you can react to emails within Outlook in some of the newer applications. So yes, I suspect that Outlook is going to evolve as well, and all of the applications, in fact. I believe there's a tool, I think it's called Loop. Yes, Microsoft Loop, which will allow you to create different assets, I suppose is the best way to describe it. So something like a table in OneNote, and draw that OneNote table into PowerPoint. Not so much AI necessarily there, but I'm sure there's going to be a lot of tie up together to make AI help you pull relevant things from relevant documents all over the place to form something new that's appropriate for whatever it is you're working on.
Loop is very cool, but it's difficult to find. It's like, where do I touch?
Yes, yeah.
Jorg asks about security and compliance concerns considering using ChatGPT inside the organization. Is it sandbox? Is it internal only? Does our information go external?
So some of the ones that I've mentioned are internal only, and they will be very clear in their messaging where they're doing that, because it's relatively unusual at the moment to do that. In the conversations I had with Unily, for example, they are using Microsoft behind the scenes, which is external. It's drawing on the world of the internet to form content at the moment, but they have applied that intranet sieve so that it does try to return slightly more appropriate responses in its output. Their next step is to consider how they're going to ring fence that generative AI so it only looks at an individual organization's content. And a lot of the vendors, that's a big challenge, trying to ring fence content, but also allow an AI enough information to generate a good enough output. So there's a lot of challenge around that that's being worked on at the moment. So a lot of the features that I've seen now are going external. So there are definitely security concerns around that. I think it was Samsung that made quite a public mistake, where people put notes from internal and sensitive meetings into ChatGPT, and where some of their developers put Samsung code into ChatGPT to help them improve on it, which is great to show the potential for AI tools and for working on code and actually speeding up that process. But that is now publicly available as part of ChatGPT, because that's what Samsung did by accident. So there are definitely security questions and considerations for you to talk about and to have within your organizations to really decide whether it's appropriate for you, the nature of your business, and where the technology is right this moment.
Talking about appropriateness, Suzie, I'm going to combine questions from Pete and our friend Lisa. Pete starts off by saying, do you think organizations should even be looking at AI at all? Shouldn't they be getting the foundations right, such as good governance, information architecture, and standards? And then Lisa asks, what do you think are the biggest challenges for comms professionals when AI tools are rolled out?
Yeah, I definitely think the basics should be done. The basics have been a challenge for as long as I have worked with intranets, and I don't think that AI will be a magic wand that will fix all of those things. I think that AI is possibly allowing intranet teams, it's not always one single intranet manager and working with lots of other people. Sometimes there is a huge intranet team, some of them could be massive according to some of the recent data we've seen, and likewise sometimes it's just part of someone's day job, it's just a task that people have to do and there's loads of people working on it. I think AI is allowing those conversations to be had about these sorts of tools and how they can be used to save people time and to improve outputs, all of those sorts of things. So it allows that conversation to then drag the conversations about getting the basics right along with it. So it allows intranet teams to refocus on that and get those foundational basics right before then looking to apply these more advanced AI tools. I think some of the AI tools will be helpful immediately, and particularly for some organizations that maybe are particularly small, so they need that leg up to get something started, for example. But I do also think they can be distracting, and this is a popular topic right now, so it is definitely a popular suite of features for organizations to be considering. So it is definitely appropriate for you to look internally at what you have right or haven't got right, what needs to be worked on, and whether AI can help with getting those basics right, or whether you need to wait a little while longer. And remind me of Lisa's question, it was about the challenges.
What should comms professionals consider when AI is dumped upon them?
Yes, so I would suggest people do make themselves familiar with the way that these tools work. So for those people who are watching who are using Microsoft tools, Copilot isn't wholly released yet and is an additional cost, so it may take some time before it suddenly appears. But there is a conversation to be had about whether you want to switch it on and invest in that anyway. Whereas the other tools, the independent intranet solutions that don't rely on SharePoint in particular, you may start to see these appearing and you may start to see people using them. I think clear communication from vendors is vital. So understanding when these features are going to be rolled out, whether they're going to be optional or not, and whether they can be switched off if they are rolled out, if you don't want them just yet. So having those conversations, understanding what's coming soon from the likes of Unily or Intranet, Staff-based, Halo, any of the ones that we featured here. And actually try and take control of those conversations and understand the nature of what's coming now, and also what's on that longer term roadmap for all of those features too, because something that might be useful right now may not be useful in a year's time. You may think it's too much. So the layers of all of these different features, you need to understand it. So there's an awful lot to absorb with the topic of AI. There are all sorts of different things out there. There are so many different conversations and moral things to think about. It really is just so much, but do your best to understand your particular position and lean into where it may particularly help you in future, to try not to panic. I think that's a big risk, is panicking about what potentially will be there or what is there now. Take that control back and actually come up with a plan with how you're going to use it, or how you're going to have the conversation that you don't want to use it as well.
Dennis points out that generative AI typically requires large amounts of data for training purposes. How does that square up with the relatively small amount of internal data?
So that's where vendors are struggling at the moment. That's why you aren't seeing anything that is ring fenced to internal data, and why it's a broader ChatGPT integration, for example, because then it just draws on the information that was available on the internet a few years back. So I think that's where they are working out how they can make an AI smart enough based on the information it's being fed internally, and whether perhaps there are external sources that they can feed into it as well to give it a little bit of a boost. So that's my assumption. I don't know that for sure, but I do know that they are tackling that issue of that ring fencing, because there are lots of things to consider around security, and also the cleverness of the AI at the end of it, and how much information is being dropped in. Because as you say, if it's not large, then it's not going to be a very smart AI. So it's a difficult balance to meet for sure.
And considering your internal AI scouring the intranet to get those answers and to build those pages, Joa, excuse my pronunciation, Joa asks, can the AI extract data from other sources, the CRM, the ERP, anything off the intranet?
So that I have not seen raised yet by vendors. I think it has been tricky enough for them to sort out APIs just to display payslips and display time off information over the last few years. There will need to be a very careful arrangement between different software providers as to how those sorts of AI queries are going to work from one platform to another, and the risks that are associated with that, and with it hallucinating and giving completely the wrong information, and a lot of kind of other things for them to consider. So that is not something that I've heard just yet, other than just presenting information in the way that the staff-based companion has done so far, which is through an existing API.
You spoke about how AI generated content isn't currently labeled, Suzie. Guillermo asks, what is your take on the user experience using generative AI? Should we continue to encourage users to double check by warning them that the content might be wrong? Could that be a hallucination? Or should it be just tagged in the background so that the administrator knows that it's been generated?
I think there's always a warning, or there's always a risk that if something like a warning that says you've just used generative AI, this might be wrong, a publisher will get blind to seeing that message coming up every single time. So it's not necessarily a useful prompt. But I think having a flag automatically generated that says it's been created by AI is helpful for the end user, in the way that you get a flag sometimes if you've used auto translate to say auto translate has been used, so the accuracy of the wording might be wrong. I think that's important for accuracy purposes, but also from that kind of authenticity and genuine nature that you want to have behind content that's been created. I think as an employee, you want to see that your organization cares about you. And so being transparent about where AI has been used for a leader's message, I think is needed, because then it allows an employee to decide how they feel about that. And also it would be helpful to have in the back end as well, I would argue, so that intranet management teams who may go through and check content generally for all of those kind of governance reasons, it's just another governance check to go and have a look at something that has been generated by AI, and just go and have a look and see if there are more bodies than there are heads in an image that's been used, or to just double check the accuracy of the information that's been returned. I saw an article only recently on a website that was about a completely different topic, so it's not about intranets at all, but was full of wrong information and hallucinations where had drawn on inaccurate information. And it's only because of the nature of the work that I do, I could see it had been created by an AI, but there was no tag to say that. And after having got in touch with the individual that had posted it, they did acknowledge that it had been created by AI. So it's like there was no way for me to say other than this is just very poor research to show that this was wrong. And I think it's important for knowledgeable employees to be able to say, hang on, this doesn't look right. Oh, it's been created by AI. I'm going to add a comment to say, I think your AI is hallucinated, and be able to influence that internally. Again, personal perspective, but yeah.
Pete says that he hopes that AI tools will help organizations appreciate the importance of knowledge management and the expertise behind knowledge management. Do you see that happening, or is it just about pretty layouts?
I think pretty layouts are the thing that senior people will see, and will be the thing that they can more easily grasp if they are not experts themselves in knowledge management or those similar things that we've talked about. But I think that AI could support knowledge management, or give a head start, or help with the governance and maintenance side of things, potentially, if not the actual generation. But I would hope that, again, the pretty page layout is a way to then start those conversations about those bigger topics, and to say, here's a picture of cats with more bodies than heads. Are you prepared for this potentially to happen within our knowledge management content, and the way that our employees are then speaking to our clients and potentially giving them the wrong information? You might be really excited about this AI, but right now this is something we have to be cognizant of. So I think it is, all of these things can generate really interesting conversations and spark really interesting debates and decision-making processes internally, if you position it right and go with an open mind and leaning into it, but also aware of where some of the shortcomings may be.
Graham says that you mentioned AI could result in the restructure of intranet teams. What do you mean? How do you see teams changing?
There are all sorts of different structures to intranet teams out there. A common one that we've seen is where the intranet is managed by a team, for example, internal communications. So the team as a whole cares about the intranet, but it's not necessarily owned by an individual. And I think that AI can support that further, so could potentially help with greater decentralization if that's a route that an organization wants to take, and allow for greater use of AI to generate pages and to generate content. But I think that need for editing and the need to understand and to care about the accuracy of what's being created means there may be a new role that we're seeing, or we're seeing a resurgence in that intranet management role, which is less common now, actually, to have a dedicated intranet manager, but it's something that individual would care about and would want to go and check that an AI generated page is accurate, and have the skills to understand to an extent what's being talked about, not necessarily the minutiae of a policy or of a process or of guidance, but just to read it to make sure it makes sense, and to understand the way the organization works, to then challenge the person who published it to say, is this particular sentence correct? You're saying that this thing needs to happen, but from what I understand the way the business works, that's not correct. So I think there will need to be almost like a AI translator, maybe, or that kind of intermediary between the AI content and the teams that are using it, just to do that check, where we know that someone in the law department or health and safety department, sorry to pick on you if you are on the call, I apologize, but people within those sorts of departments aren't always the most skilled when it comes to creating intranet pages now. So if they then use a shortcut to use AI to then create it, they still won't have those skills to know what is potentially not quite right from a design perspective, from a content perspective. And that's where I think there's a need for a role to do those checks.
Angela, hi there, Angela. Talking about the AI bandwagon, it's right, it's really exciting last year and this year, but how do IC professionals manage the expectations of leaders in the C-suite?
I think it goes back to what I've already said about understanding what you have now and what is next 6 months imminently going to be rolled out to you from the tools that you're using, knowing what's coming, and then from the perspective of your business, knowing or understanding what you feel is going to be appropriate or not, or whether it's appropriate to hold back for a little while and launch something a bit later, where your gaps are. I think it can be a bandwagon in a way. It is definitely one of those topics that's dominating all areas of business. So really taking that control will help you feel more in control when it comes to your own business. And control comes from understanding and knowing what's coming and how it can work for you, or where you feel a delay is needed, and really driving those conversations rather than waiting for it to come to you. We probably all have experienced working in an organization where a completely different department decides to go and source a piece of software to solve a particular problem that they've decided exists, and they've not checked whether existing software can do that. They've not asked whether there's another project that's going on that might already be able to solve something along the same lines, or duplicating the content. And I think there's a risk with AI, because it is such a hot topic, that every department will want to start rolling out all of the AI features that they find in their software. So I think having that almost like a steering committee conversation about AI, or taking over an intranet steering committee if you have one, and talking about AI, or maybe just dropping it into conversation and lining up those conversations, could be appropriate for organizations. And again, to make you feel a bit more in control, so it doesn't feel thrust on you if and when it eventually lands. Unlike the conversations of just over a decade ago now, when Microsoft bought Yammer, there was conversations all over the place that no other social tool would be used in organizations other than Yammer, and that didn't come to pass. There are clearly other social tools, even in Microsoft now, that are being used, and Yammer has been retired as its own brand. The difference is with AI, it is so broad reaching and beyond like an individual organization, beyond a digital workplace, I think it is going to be a bigger thing than something like Yammer. So those conversations are definitely worthwhile having. If you can spark them and try and lend your control to them a bit, I think you will feel more confident about it.
Our friend Sebastian asks, do you think vendors will add central controls to AI so that the intranet team, for example, can govern how it's used? He's thinking about tone of voice. He's thinking about in-house style guides, so that anything produced by the AI kind of matches what you would expect inside this organization already.
Yes, so I've seen some of that being talked about. Interact is a good example there, actually, where their plan, as well as the general sentiment of content and the kind of inclusivity language that's chosen. So folks instead of guys, their next step was to reflect on how to bring in company guidance around things like tone of voice, that kind of brand speak as an overlay on top of that. Whether that would be applied more broadly to something like generative AI, that's not something I've seen just yet. I think it would be the next step on from the ring fencing of creating content. So it would be the layer that goes on top of that being nailed by the vendors that I've not seen spoken about just yet, from the vendors I've spoken to anyway.
All right, well, people are thanking you already, Suzie, for a fab session. Thank you there, Pete. And we will record this video and send it out to you shortly. Any final words, Suzie?
I want to add that this is complicated, and I think it creates complicated feelings between people, within an individual as well. It is a huge topic, and I've given a small snapshot of just these intranet tools and the things that are coming quite purposely, because this is where your day-to-day life may see some of these things. There are bigger conversations and thoughts to have about AI, and I certainly am trying to educate myself more about it and where the benefits lie, how it can be used well. And I think that's what we all who are feeling a little bit nervous about the implications for our jobs and for the jobs of our colleagues, and also organisational impact, definitely worthwhile doing that education piece if you can, because I think it will help all of us feel a little bit more confident, and again, that control, and take it back. But thank you very much for everyone for coming along. I hope you have found it useful, and we'll keep you posted on what comes up in the next 6 months.